Authentication and the best evidence rule scripts. Rule number one, the general rule for authentication is that the proponent must produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the evidence is what it purports to be. Repeat, the proponent must prove what? Produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the evidence is what it purports to be. One more time. The proponent must produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the evidence is what it purports to be. That is our general rule for authentication. The quote, best evidence rule applies to the authentication of three things: writings, recordings, and photographs. And it states that, here's our rule, to prove the contents of a writing, recording, or photograph, one must produce the original or a duplicate reproduced by a process such that it is an exact copy of the original. To prove the contents of a writing, recording, or photograph, the proponent must produce the original or a duplicate reproduced by a process such that it is an exact copy of the original. What are we proving? The contents of a writing or recording or photograph. We must produce what? The original or a duplicate. Okay. Caveat, summaries of voluminous documents are acceptable, as are certified copies. Rule number 3. If no original or duplicate exist, the contents may be proved in any other manner. If no original or duplicate exists, the contents may still be proved in any other manner. So rule number 1, to authenticate evidence, the proponent must produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the evidence is what it purports to be. Rule number 2, the best evidence rule. To prove the contents of a writing, recording, or photograph, the proponent must produce the original or duplicate reproduced by a mechanical or other process such that it is an exact copy of the original. Summaries are acceptable. Rule number 3, if no original or duplicate exists, the contents may be proved in any other manner. Let's go into that rule just a little bit. No original or duplicate exists. That means, obviously, that the original might have been lost or destroyed, can't be obtained by the judicial process, the opponent has control of it and fails to produce it. Or finally, the adverse party described it in prior testimony or described it in a written statement, and counsel is using that testimony or writing against them. Okay, so this is kind of like former testimony, and it's also kind of like the statement against interest. But let's go back. Okay, we don't have the original. We don't have the duplicate. Why? 1, lost or destroyed. 2, can't be obtained by the judicial process. 3, the opponent has control of it and fails to produce it. Or 4, the adverse party described it in prior testimony or by written statement, and counsel is using that specific testimony against the AP. The first 3 are usually the most likely. So if we don't have an original or duplicate, because the opponent has control of it, not giving it up, can't get it through the judicial process, it's lost or destroyed, the contents may be proved in any other manner. Okay, so those are our 3 rules. Now, moving to authentication. Number 1, photographs. Photographs may be proved by an opinion or testimony, hopefully of someone who took the photograph, or they may be proved by evidence of a process or system. For example, that the X-ray machine or the camera produces an accurate result. Photographs may be proved by testimony in the form of an opinion, or via evidence of a process or system, and that process produces an accurate result. Remember, the testimony of a witness with knowledge works for everything. So for photographs, testimony of a witness with knowledge or evidence of a process or system. Okay, how about a telephone conversation? Incoming call, testimony of a witness with knowledge, familiar with the caller's voice. Authenticating an incoming telephone conversation. The witness is familiar with the caller's voice. Testimony of a witness with knowledge. The witness is familiar with the caller's voice. An outgoing call. Evidence. An outgoing call may be proved by evidence that the number was assigned to the adverse party and that the adverse party answered the phone. 3, telephone conversations regarding business. The rule is a business call may be authenticated if the call was made to a business and business was transacted over the telephone. Okay, authentication, rule number 1, testimony of a witness with knowledge works for just about everything. Number 1, photographs, testimony of a witness with knowledge or evidence that the camera or whatever, that process or system produces an accurate result. To authenticate a telephone conversation, authenticating an incoming call may be done by a witness with knowledge, familiar with the caller's voice. An outgoing call may be authenticated by evidence that the number was assigned to the AP recipient and that the recipient answered the phone. A business call may be authenticated by evidence showing the call was made to the business and business was transacted over the telephone. Okay, now let's go to handwriting. So we're going to documents now. So first type of document is handwriting. First of all, testimony of a witness with knowledge, not acquired for the litigation. A non-expert opinion. Handwriting may be identified by a non-expert witness with knowledge, not acquired for the litigation. Handwriting, non-expert opinion, witness with knowledge not acquired for the litigation. The trier of fact may authenticate handwriting by comparing it with an authenticated specimen, or an expert witness may compare it with an authenticated specimen. Okay, handwriting. Number 1, handwriting may be authenticated via non-expert opinion, a witness with knowledge not acquired for the litigation. The trier of fact may compare with an authenticated specimen, or an expert witness may compare with an authenticated specimen. Okay, what about a public record? So we're getting to documents again. Evidence that the document was filed in the appropriate office as authorized by law, and the document is from the office where such files are kept. So here's the rule. To authenticate a public record, we need evidence that the document was filed in the appropriate office as authorized by law, and that the document is from the office where such files are kept. Okay, ancient documents. This also goes for data compilation. No suspicion as to their authenticity, found in a place where if authentic, it would likely be, and is at least 20 years old when offered. Finally, we get a catch-all. Any other method provided in a statute or rule. That's our catch-all. Okay, let's run through those one more time. What's our number 1 rule of authentication? The proponent must produce evidence sufficient to support a finding that the evidence is what it purports to be. The best evidence rule, state the rule. To prove the contents of a writing, recording, or photograph, the proponent must produce the original or a duplicate reproduced by mechanical or other process such that it is an exact copy of the original. If we don't have an original duplicate, the contents may be proved in, that's right, any other manner. And how do we not have an original duplicate? Okay, lost, destroyed, can't be obtained by the judicial process, or the opponent has control and fails to produce it. And finally, our adverse party described it in prior testimony, and counsel's using that testimony against them. But normally it's going to be one of those three. Moving on to authentication. Our number one rule is that testimony of a witness with knowledge will authenticate just about any document. Authentication of 1, photographs, opinion or testimony of a witness with knowledge, or evidence of a process or system and that it produces accurate results. For a telephone conversation, an incoming call, testimony of a witness with knowledge familiar with the caller's voice. An outgoing call, evidence that the number was assigned to the AP recipient and that the recipient answered the phone. And a business call, the call was made to a business and business was transacted over the telephone. Handwriting, non-expert opinion, witness with knowledge not acquired for the litigation, trier of fact may compare, expert witness may compare. One other doctrine we didn't talk about, and that's the reply letter doctrine. So if a letter appears to be a reply letter, that's circumstantial evidence of its authenticity. Ancient documents, no suspicion as to authenticity, found in a place where, if authentic, it would likely be, is at least 20 years old when offered, and any other method provided in a statute or rule. Two other things that I forgot. Distinctive characteristics and the like. Distinctive characteristics and the like can authenticate a document, anything, a gun, a baseball bat, its appearance, its contents, its substance, or its patterns, distinctive characteristics and the like. And remember, the chain of custody, breaks in the chain of custody will not bar admission. Questions as to its authenticity will go to the weight of the evidence, not to its admission. And that's it for authentication.